Time to get up.
Get that, probably for me.
That's
That's
exactly
probably
what
for
mine
me, I'll
was.
take that.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission to order. It's 2 o'clock. Ms. Gay, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, I'm filling in for Secretary Dewey today. When I call your name, please respond. Commissioner Davis.
Here.
And Commissioner Dewey is out. Commissioner Ellison.
Here.
Commissioner Hunter.
Here.
Commissioner Stewart.
Here.
Commissioner Stockdale is also out. Commissioner Strange.
Here.
And I'm, Commissioner Gay, am here. Chair Bryan.
Here.
Okay, so Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ms. Womack, would you please give us the verification of the meeting notice, please?
The agenda for the planning commission special meeting was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on April 3rd and was sent out the same day. The agenda was amended and reposted in City Hall and on the city portal on April 4th and April 10th. Public notices for preliminary review of site plan review application number 0323-01 for the properties located at 413 Rehoboth Avenue, application number 0323-02 for the property located at 415 Rehoboth Avenue, and application number 0323-03 for the property located at 417 Rehoboth Avenue were posted in City Hall and on the city portal on March 19th. The 3 notices were published in the Cape Gazette on March 26th and March 29th, and Delaware State News on March 22nd and March 27th. Notifications specific to each of these projects were mailed out to property owners within 200 feet, and signage was posted on each property. That's all I have.
Thank you. The first matter on the agenda is approval of minutes for November 14, 2022, December 9, 2022, January 13, 2023, June 9, 2023, and September 8, 2023. All those in favor of...
Well, we get a motion.
Oh, that's right. Is there a motion to approve?
Yeah, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, those minutes are approved. Ms. Womack, is there any correspondence?
No.
All right. As to new business, I just wanted to be sure that there was an agenda item for a partitioning lot consolidation application that was deferred today. And Mr. Robertson, I believe that was yours?
It was, that's correct. We sent a letter asking for continuance based on some things that are happening at the mayor and commissioner's level, so, yes.
All right. I just wanted to be sure if anyone from the public is here, if you are here for that application, it will not be heard today.
And thank you for granting that continuance, too.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
54 Kent.
Yeah, it's 54 Kent.
Right, that's right.
Is that right? All right. Then new business, we have a preliminary review of site plan review applications that Ms. Womack has just referenced for basically 3 parcels. It's the former Clear Space properties, as I recollect,
Okay, that's-
having been through that. So 413, 415, and 417 Rehoboth Avenue. The purpose of a preliminary review meeting is called for in the city code, Chapter 23632G, as in golf, is to receive preliminary input from city officials, nearby property owners, and the public, and to determine whether additional information is needed from the applicant or others, and whether there are legal or factual issues that need further clarification prior to final action by the Planning Commission at a subsequent meeting. So that is what we're here for today. Mr. Robertson?
Thank you. And at the beginning, too, I would like to thank the commission, the planning commission, for scheduling a special meeting to handle this as well. You know, that's certainly much appreciated by everybody on our side. So what we'd like to do, like we did the concept plan, these are 3 separate applications, but I don't want to say the same thing 3 times any more than you all want to hear the same thing 3 times. So just presentation-wise, we're going to consolidate it into one, knowing that you'll have to act separately on each one. Ms. Womack, if you could turn the screens on. Don't worry, this is a shorter PowerPoint than I did at the concept plan stage. But it might be slightly familiar. So what we have on the screen are just renderings of the revised plans. There were some slight revisions that Jeff Sholkoff will go through. I am here today with Dave McCarthy of Rehoboth Property Development. He's the owner and developer of this. As I mentioned, Jeff's here. He's the architect with the design group. He's I don't know if you remember, he's very familiar with Rehoboth. He's done several prominent projects in Rehoboth. We're going to get to the design manual briefly, but he actually designed several of the projects in Rehoboth that were used as examples for Rehoboth Beach's design manual. So again, familiar with the city and its architecture. Then we have Roger Gross behind Jeff, who is the PE of record for this project. In light of that, we have the building and licensing, the combined report of building and licensing in Wallace Montgomery that confirms that these are 3 fully code compliant buildings. We're going to go through, they're compliant with the city's comprehensive plan. They are much less intensive in use than could be put on this property if it was one lot that was 150 feet wide with 0 lot coverage and a 100% lot coverage and a 2.0 FAR, or even 3 lots that were fully C1, again with 100% lot coverage and a 2.0 FAR. As you can see from the designs, they follow the classic beach house model that everyone likes in Rehoboth Beach, and again, that mirrors what's set forth in the city's architectural guideline. This is an important project to Rehoboth. It's at the gateway to Rehoboth Beach, as you all know, right past the circle. Once you get past the lighthouse, it's kind of one of the first things you see on your left coming into town, and it's one of the last things you see leaving town. And it sort of sets the tone for the architectural theme that we like to see in Rehoboth Beach. Another positive impact of it is the economic one. When these 3 buildings are built, we estimate there'll be about $90,000 in building fees and then the increased tax revenues in perpetuity after that versus the vacant lot that's there today. I started out by saying that it's consistent with the area, but I don't think that's actually accurate, but in a positive way. Usually we try to say it's consistent. Here, I kind of want to distinguish it and say it's not. I don't have pictures, but I think we all know. If you're looking at this, you can sort of see to the right is the Arc, which is a great big concrete 4 or 5-story condo that has virtually no character on it. And then to the left, to the west, there's Weath and Home, which is actually a very attractive building, smaller but similar to these. But then beyond that, it's another concrete building, which is a laundromat and a Royal Farms with some apartments up top. So we think, with all due respect to those 2 buildings, that this is an improvement to the neighborhood and consistent with what Rehoboth, frankly, what the character of Rehoboth is and what Rehoboth says it wants to be. As I mentioned at the concept review, these 3 projects there's a lot of background that went into them. Obviously, everybody knows what happened with ClearSpace. That was a long and drawn-out process that was appealed to the mayor and commissioners. There were actually 2 hearings at the Planning Commission. It was very controversial, and it really divided the city, I feel like, in terms of people that wanted that project, the people that did not. My clients wanted to avoid that completely. We don't want any parts of that. So they looked around, what's an attractive building that we can build that is code compliant, that is not controversial, and that we can look at and see and realize that it has a positive impact on the streetscape. And they found 48 Wilmington Avenue, which I'll get to in a moment. But that's what led them to Mr. Sholkoff, because he was the architect of record for that project. Mr. McCarthy and his companies had nothing to do with the construction of it or ownership of it, but they liked that project, knew that it was built, didn't need any variances, and again, it's an asset to Wilmington Avenue. So Mr. McCarthy met with Mr. Sholkoff, designed plans based on that, going back, I think about 4 years, maybe 4.5 years at this point, had multiple meetings with Matt to make sure everything was locked down tight and code compliant, and then that led to submitting to you all. So what I plan to do today, or this afternoon, is run through briefly a PowerPoint, just because I have to make a record. That's the lawyer in me, it says I got to do that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sholkoff to go through sort of more of the architectural details and the measurements and all that sort of technical stuff. So with that in mind, you've seen, this is what you see when you drive down Rehoboth Avenue coming or going to the city. These are the 3 lots. They're sitting vacant right now. Interestingly, on the one nearest the Arc, there was a cottage that was there it had been commercial on the first floor and residential on the top. It would happen. Mame Witzel owned it. She had a business there, and when she first got married, she lived in a little apartment up top. That house was actually moved outside of town, but there were other buildings on these two lots as well. Of course, they were removed at the time clear space was getting ready to develop, and it's been sitting empty ever since. So again, that's sort of the first impression you get now coming into Rehoboth or leaving Rehoboth. It's not a great one. We think that these three structures will set the feel and tone that people like to see in Rehoboth. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to get to this in a second. The project is compliant with the comp plan. That was referenced by the Building Licensing and Wallace Montgomery joint report, the first one that they submitted, and it was cited by us in our response. I just want to read some of those to get those into the record because I think they're important and show how this project hits each one of those comp plan requirements. So goal 3.1 was improve the quality and integrity of architecture in new and renovated residential and commercial structures throughout the city. Again, we think that this improves the quality and integrity of the architecture in that block, and certainly these will be attractive buildings. Goal 3.3, preserve Rehoboth's overall small-town character and charm, as well as its pedestrian orientation and ambiance, all of which should be consistent with the distinctive architecture and scale of existing development within the city's individual neighborhoods. We'll get to that in a moment with the design manual, but again, these comply with that standard, particularly the pedestrian orientation and ambiance, because you'll see when we go back, actually, and look at these, there's large porches that are inviting to pedestrians that are set back. So there's the pavement, there's the sidewalk, there's green space, and then there's the porches, which really set the pedestrian feel for this block, again, compared with the Royal Farms and the Arc next door. Goal 4.3 is identify opportunities for appropriate redevelopment and repurposing of commercial structures and land uses throughout the city limits to achieve consistency with the city's existing scale, architectural design, pedestrian-oriented character, and compatibility with nearby residential neighborhoods. Again, these three structures that you really see on the right side comply with that, as noted by Wallace Montgomery. Goal 5.2, support and encourage a variety of housing stock for all ages and income levels. Again, we are proposing residential units on the second floor above the retail on the first floor. Goal 5.3, identify opportunities for the creative redevelopment of selected properties on Rehoboth Avenue and other commercial districts of a scale and design consistent with the small town character of the city. Again, we will show that it complies with that goal. And goal 5.5, protect the small town character, design, and scale of distinctive groupings of existing buildings, streetscapes, and neighborhoods. Again, Wallace Montgomery said that we complied with all those, and we will show that as well. So this is the city's architectural design manual. It's November of 2007, but it's not been updated, but I think it still applies equally today like it did in 2007. And again, Jeff and Dave looked at that for guidance. As I mentioned, Jeff actually designed several examples in it. I'm not going to read it all, but some of the architectural characteristics, they talk about varying forms and heights. We hit that. They want front and side porches. We hit that. Gable roofs facing the street. We hit that on the buildings with ridge lines that are perpendicular to the street. We satisfy that. And then secondary masses of additions, porches, and entries. We hit that as well. And that's in other words, so you don't have a single solitary wall that just faces you from the streetscape. They talk about architectural styles. Again, I'm not going to read this, but again, it mentions gable ends to the street, which we comply with. And it mentions what's called the Rehoboth cottage, sort of a modification of a traditional farmhouse style. When you look at the renderings that were up at the beginning, that's what these designs are, the way they're designed to mimic that look. So we feel like that's complied with as well. I'm going to go through the principles for, in general, there's 5 of them in commercial, the ones that we hit. The one I did want to hit of the principles is the environmentally friendly design and green architecture. I don't have a nice, happy slide for that, but this will be served by geothermal. There will not be any outside HVAC units on this because of that. So we do comply with that one. So the integrity of the architectural design, this is just sort of guidance on what Rehoboth would like to see. I've circled two of those. One is the old J. Con Scott building, which was, again, retail on the first floor and residential on top. I think originally that was all one residential building. Frankly, I'm not sure what it is now because I know J. Con Scott's left. But that's an example that mirrors the type of structure we're looking for. Claws is down here. Same thing where there's a front porch that's inviting and on a pedestrian scale with, although there's offices up top, it could just as easily be residential up top. This one is actually beneficial in several ways, this slide. The top drawing is Stokely and King Charles. I think I mentioned last time this house has been substantially renovated, so it looks completely different. This is the old Camel's Hump and Eden next to it. Again, showing residential, the old cottage style, residential or excuse me, in this case a restaurant, with residential up top, and the same thing with Eden next door. But you can see there's the porches, there's the varied entryway, there's the gable ends, everything that our design achieves. This one is an interesting design because this is, again, in the architectural design manual. It says, these dwellings individually contribute to the city character and neighborhood identity. This is basically exactly like what we're proposing to build, these three structures. They're all in harmony with each other. All three of ours actually have the gable ends facing outward with the ridge line perpendicular to the street, set back off the street with porches. What the city doesn't want is sort of a varied building pattern where there's a lack of context. In this case, there's a great big one in the middle. It's just interesting that our design really, frankly, mirrors that so well that you all set forth in your design manual. This is one of the residential guidelines, porches. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. This just shows multiple examples of porches throughout the city. And again, all three of our structures have porches so that they're inviting and architecturally pleasing and pedestrian friendly. This is a commercial design guideline, demonstrate consistency in design composition. The one on the right's bad, is what the manual says. The one on the left is good. Again, I would suggest that the Eden version is similar to ours, although it has the two gable ends. The primary roof gable runs parallel with the street, but it has the porches that's inviting. This one is just a big block concrete structure. Frankly, that could be built on this site. It would be out of compliance with the architectural guidelines, but you could build a 2.0 FAR, across all three lots there. Again, that's not something that Mr. McCarthy wants to do. Another design guideline that we comply with is reflect the character and context of the city. And these are two examples. I'm not going to dwell on it, but again, there's some facade differences. It's broken up here, and then we have same thing here with the roof line across the front and the gable ends facing the street. This is another commercial design guideline that we comply with that says that you should be in scale with your surroundings. I would say to some extent we're not in scale, but again, in a positive way. We're a lot like this situation here where there's an old Rehoboth house next to an existing hotel that sort of towers over it. But these two examples, for example, I think set the tone for what we're doing. One is the old McQuay's Market. I think this was when it was McQuay's. And now it's Egg with its expansive front porch and gable end fencing facing the street. This one's old enough that it still says Chez La Mer. I don't know how long that's been gone. I think it's been 4 or 5 restaurants since then. But again, you get the idea with the broken up facade and the gable end facing Bayard Avenue. Another commercial design guideline that we comply with is to have appropriate mass and bulk. This one here, Monograms Unlimited, although I'm not sure that's still Monograms Unlimited either, but the building still exists. That is an example of, not maximizing mass and bulk, whereas this is an example of maximizing the mass and bulk, and we're not doing that. We're in compliance with, the goals and the guidelines that are desired under this manual. Another commercial design guideline is to reflect an appropriate rhythm. And the examples here are Penny Lane. That doesn't quite comport with what we're doing just because it's larger and it's a through block, a little shopping mall. But we have Claws, which again is the porch and the residential over top. The J. Con Scott building. There's the wooden Indian behind these trees, and then Eden. This is sort of that same block looking the other way. And again, really when you look at the old Camel's Hump, which I don't think is even there anymore, but that really mirrors, again, what we're trying to do with the porch on the ground level, the gable end facing outwards towards the street. This is just roof form and pitch, about the 10th place where it talks about that, with there being gable ends facing outward, and just adding character to the structure so it's not a great big wall like some of those other examples. And then lastly, we have 48 Wilmington Avenue. Again, this is where this project started when we looked at that and saw that it was a good example of a code-compliant building in Rehoboth Beach that's been successful, has not had an adverse impact on the neighborhood, the street. It's pedestrian-friendly. It has the porch out front where folks can, are invited into the commercial space below. No variances were required for that. Fully code-compliant. I have the slides after this that show all the plans stamped by the city. I'm not going to go through that, but I mean, just to show you they're there with the city stamp on them. And again, this is where we started because we wanted to make sure we didn't create any controversy in the city, that we gave the city what it's asking for, that we gave the city something that's been approved, hasn't required any variances, and has a positive impact on the streetscape. So with that, what I'd like to do is, well, let me back up too. Since we're here for the concept review, there's been, correspondence back and forth. And the last item was the joint report from Building and Licensing in Wallace Montgomery, which I'm sure has been reviewed by Mr. Burns as well. And in that, it states that there's no issues with compliance with the zoning code. We did make some tweaks, as you recall, in the concept plan. There were some issues with some measurements where our measurements were slightly off from Matt's. That's all been resolved, and we're all fully compliant. And that's evidenced on each one on the first page. It talks about, items in bold red text are those ones that require addressing. And in all three of them, the only thing that required, which we acknowledge, required to be addressed in the future was the signage. And we recognize that. That's going to come at a later date when, once these are built and we're dealing with tenant fit outs, we're going to have to comply with the sign code. So that's understood. But other than that, both Wallace Montgomery and the Building and Licensing Department have determined these structures to be code compliant. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Shilkoff.
Mr. Robertson, before you go.
Okay.
You're asking for one residential unit. Is that right?
For each unit.
Each building?
Yes, one residential unit, that's correct.
Even though it's a story and a half of residential, it's one?
One.
Okay.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm not sure we could get to, because with the, there's a 5,000 square foot requirement anyway,
Right.
so. But yeah, just to be clear, yeah.
Wanted, when I saw that little addition on the top.
Yeah, so. No, and Mr. Shulkoff can talk about the design of that. Yeah, I'll get you squared away.
This thing has two different sides. It plays to the C or the thing. So
Oh yeah, it's the bigger one. Bear with me, I hope I don't fry the city system. All right, hold on.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all again. I think everyone was here when we had concept review.
Yes.
Is that correct? So I won't belabor my experiences and the basic designs. I'd like to just get to the nuts and bolts of what we did with the plans and how we addressed the things.
I think
before.
that's you, right?
Yeah.
You just need to get yourself.
So I'm in here. So right, so I'll just pull up one set of plans as an example. It's similar on all three lots. We can go, if anyone has any questions, we can go to the others. First of all, thanks also for the special meeting. I realize that you guys have another big one tomorrow, and we appreciate being able to try to make progress on this. When we had the last hearing, when we had the concept review, we had the reports from Wallace Montgomery and from Matt Janis, and the items that were bolded, we've had some discussion about, some that needed just slight tweaks, some that needed a little more substantial change. We had that hearing, or that meeting on, I think, 3rd of November, and we responded on the where were we? We responded by the 28th with the revised plans, revised site plan by Mirstone, and I think sometime after that, Vince responded to some of the legal issues raised in the, I guess, in the minutes or the notes that you guys forwarded after the meeting. To be specific on, say, 413, for example, here, the items that were clarified were the rear yard depth applying to the second floor decks off the residential. So we revised them as a tier 1 use to 10 feet. Here, this is, so that would be in the second floor back here, the decks, oh, actually, second floor here, the decks were cut back to be a 10-foot setback, 10'2" it shows on the plans now. The side yard was the places where we were most misunderstanding the code from some of our several preliminary reviews, in believing now that the aggregate had to be 20 feet and not 16 feet. So previously it was all designed at 8 and 10 or 8 and 8. And we have now revised all these plans so that the side yard setbacks at the residential are 20-foot aggregate. So it's 10 and 10. I think on one of them it might be 8 and 12. But they were revised to comply. We also came to the understanding that the residential decks on the upper floor, although they had not been reviewed that way. First of all, that item I just talked about was not how it was reviewed in 2018 when we did the 48 Wilmington project. So our misunderstanding from thinking we could move forward with the same thing, I think it was a different interpretation of the code this time around. Understand that happens. Same thing happened with roof decks. When the 2018 project came along, no one mentioned that the residential roof decks on the second floor couldn't extend into the side yard setbacks. We understand now that that's the interpretation here, and they've all been cut back so that there's no roof decks within that 10-foot. So the residential roof decks are all within, outside of the rear yard setback, outside of the side yard setback. There are some smaller areas of deck that are compliant there. The building height, there was on this project a discrepancy of 1 inch in how Matt was measuring it and how we measured it. So it's now been corrected, but with the narrowing of the buildings, it came down more than that. So now it's compliant by more. I think the FAR calculations, we had some very, very minor discrepancies on all 3 lots. Again, with the reduced residential footprint by tightening up those side yard setbacks. They're all well within compliance. And again, as Vince noted, the signage needs to be by a separate permit, but that will have to be done once we know the tenants. I believe it was very similar. Oh, I guess the one other issue was, I'm not sure it applied on this one, but on some of them, we had the first floor plan, we had the stairwell sticking into the setback, which was the stairwell designed to access the residential apartment. And we had thought that just that being the access, maybe it could go into that side yard setback. We believe now, following that review, that it shouldn't. So all of the stairwells have been set back on all 3 plans to meet the 10-foot setback. Are there any questions about any of that? That was the main thing we did. I think Roger revised his site plan to reflect what we had done. So, you know, we believe that we responded to all of the items that were highlighted in that report in terms of FAR, building height, side yard, rear yard setbacks. I mean, I think does anyone want to look through the other plans? It was pretty similar for all 3 properties, so I'm happy to pull out more specifics if anyone's interested.
Well, I hate to do this, but why don't you just do a brief overview for the other 2, just so we, you know, because with 3 separate applications.
Okay.
I know
Okay.
that might be tedious, but just so we're clear on that.
Okay, so on lot 139, which is 415 Rehoboth, same thing, rear yard setback of the deck was pulled back to 10 feet. Side yards were 10 and 10, so it's aggregate. calculations were done so that FAR is, on this one, 1.81. This one was compliant to begin with. And the height is dialed down so that it's 41.4 where it's allowed to be 42. And then on lot 141, which is 417, you'll see the same thing. The outdoor deck is pulled back 10 feet each direction. The side yards are 10 and 10, so there's 20-foot aggregate. FAR is compliant at 1.94, and the height here is 40'9". I'd say the only slight correction to Mr. Robertson's presentation was that all three gables don't face the street. This one is a kind of a takeoff on the old cottages with the sharper roof and the lower roof facing the street. So it has prominent gables facing that you can see from the circle, actually. And then it was interesting, I never even noticed it in the diagram from the design manual, but actually we have almost exactly what's in the manual, where it has a hip roof building in the middle, a gable face on one end, and this kind of a cottage on the other end, but we did it the other way. So maybe we did it wrong. We could just switch them if you want. It would work, actually. So I don't think I have anything more in detail unless you all have questions. I mean, I think we addressed the things noted by the building official straight up, and I think some of the other questions might be more in Vince's court.
Well, don't go anywhere.
Okay.
We don't know that yet. So that, I mean, again, that concludes our presentation. There was, a good bit of back and forth, particularly between Jeff and Matt's team in Wallace Montgomery. I know they took a deep dive on it, and it seems like this whole project is really fairly straightforward because it complies first with the comprehensive plan, like we talked about. It's not controversial, hopefully. It complies with the architectural design guidelines, and we've got confirmation from not just building and licensing, but also the city's consultant that it complies with the zoning code. So that concludes our presentation. If you have specific general questions, we'll answer those, or as I said, specific questions for each of the three applications.
Members of the commission? Any questions?
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Mr. Robertson. I have a question that just goes to your citation of one aspect of the CDP. And I believe I understood you to say that one of the ways that this project would advance the goals of the CDP is that one of those goals is an increase in residential units for all income levels. I'm not sure I've got the wording exactly correct, but I believe that's what you said or close to that. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Well, sure. So, and it's goal 5.2, and you had it pretty close, support and encourage a variety of housing stock for all ages and income levels. In Rehoboth, there's not a big inventory of apartments or rental units or smaller units. We have the condos, we have Edgewater House and stuff on the ocean. We've got the Ark. I agree with that. But you can't build garage apartments anymore. You can't build smaller units in Rehoboth. And so this is a different type of housing stock. And for that reason, if it's an apartment that's rentable or if it's a condominium that's buyable, it's different than a 3,000 square foot house, which seems to be the predominant housing stock we have in Rehoboth. I don't know if that exactly answers it. I mean, it's not a science to it, but that's where
Right.
it's coming from.
So that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be premised on the idea that the residential units in these buildings would not be very short-term rentals. That is, a week at a time type rentals.
I can't say that for sure, in all honesty. I mean, in terms of the type of housing stock they're not, the larger homes or the oceanfront condos and that sort of thing.
So it really depends on how the rentals are what the terms are of the rentals.
Yeah, and I suppose that's true for all the housing in
Yeah.
Rehoboth. Right.
And I'm curious, do you know, I mean, you cited a number of times the example of 48 Wilmington, I think. Do you happen to know what the terms are of any rentals or whether those are rentals?
I do not know. I'm not sure. I don't know. It's owner occupied. Is it? Okay.
It's
Yeah,
owner
Mr.
occupied.
Shilkoff, he's not on the, yeah, okay, so that's owner occupied.
Okay,
actually don't know if he rents it when they're not here,
yeah,
but he's here most of the year.
great.
Just since he wasn't on the microphone, Mr. Shilkoff said he doesn't know if he rents it when he's not here, but it's owner occupied.
Great. Thank you.
Actually, I have sort of a follow-up and very related issue to that. Along with what Commissioner Hunter was saying about the goal on the variety of housing stock, which you addressed, you know, you quoted the CDP in a number of places, but in one place in this same section on mixed-use housing, it specifically says that any zone allowing mixed residential and commercial uses should restrict short-term rentals. And I'm wondering, I think this came up at the concept hearing, but I don't recall the answer. Is there an intent to do that?
An intent to?
Yes.
There's not an intent one way or the other at this point. I mean, we're just trying to get through
Okay.
the process.
So then some aspects of the CDP tie into the plan, but not all of them, is you would acknowledge.
You know, so I would disagree to an extent on that because these are aspirational goals, goal 3.1, 3.3. This is what we want the city to look like. You know, this is
Right.
the kind of thing we want to see in the city. And certainly that's in the comprehensive plan, but that's more of a goal to enact legislation to carry that out, which is different than aspirational goals in terms of how we want things to be constructed.
So there is no plan at this point to create this variety of housing stock that would include affordable housing or full-year rental or any kind of restriction, you're saying?
I would answer it this way, and I'm not trying to dodge the question, but there's just not a plan yet, you know,
Okay.
for that.
That's fine, thanks.
I mean, there's three of them, so they're, you know,
Right.
then there's one Mr. McCarthy, so they're not going to
Right.
be owner occupied, but.
Right, yeah, well, no doubt.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Microphone.
Yeah.
I don't think we really know.
I got to get Mr. McCarthy, you have to give your
Yeah,
name, too.
got it.
Please state your name, please, sir.
Dave McCarthy.
Okay.
We don't really have a plan yet. Same with the commercial, because I don't know who the tenants are. I mean, we're not that far ahead. I understand what you're asking, but, you know, again, some of it has to do with, you know, who the tenants, I mean, there's a lot that plays into that. So unfortunately, I can't answer that question right now, just like I couldn't on the commercial.
Fair enough, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Ellison.
I think you know I raised this issue at the last time we heard this. I'm curious then why you have plans that where the goal seems to be 5 bedrooms. In one scheme, I think it's the middle one, 415, there are no closets anywhere in the entire apartment, certainly not in any of the bedrooms. It might lead one to think that, you know, what we're really looking at here are famous mini hotels over one floor of or over one floor of commercial. Can you explain why the 5 bedrooms, you know, became such a mandate?
So I think there are closets, but if there weren't closets, we would do built-ins. We do a lot of them in the regular non-rental, regular houses. A lot of times people opt not to do closets. They actually do built-ins. As far as that goes, we chose 5 bedrooms because the code allows it. So if you all change the code and tell me it's 3 bedrooms that I'm allowed to build, even on the regular houses, I'll build 3 bedrooms. I'm following your code. I didn't write the code. So I mean that with all due respect, but I'm just doing what the code says I'm allowed to do. If it had a restriction on bedrooms, I would put a restriction on bedrooms. So I guess I'm a little lost on that. I mean, I'm just following the code. It gives a certain amount of square feet that I can use for the residential unit. So that's what we went with. I mean, that's how we designed it. It's just like, if the code said we can only have one fireplace, well, then I would design the unit to have one fireplace. I mean, I'm following the code.
Anyone else?
I have a question. So can you address the height? Because you've got a commercial use and a residential use.
So certainly, and really, I don't need to, as much as I can just point you to the city's official that said we're in compliant with that. You know, this is essentially a commercial building, so it goes by the 42-foot commercial height, and Matt said that, and so is Wallace Montgomery. And I would point out, that was a determination made, you know, on March 8th, and nobody's appealed that to the Board of Adjustment either, so.
But that's not what the code says.
That's what the building official said we comply with. That's what Wallace Montgomery said we comply with. That's what Mr. Burns has reviewed those documents, and, you know, we're following what the code says and we're following what the city's determination was.
But Mr. Robertson, you're aware that the Planning Commission is not bound by those findings of the building inspector.
I disagree with that completely.
All right, sir. Do you disagree with the disclosure on the March H. 2024 building and licensing letter that you claim said everything was code compliant? That this letter and the comments here contained herein in no way indicates approval of the application, nor do they vest any rights to the applicant the authority to formally review, hold public hearing on, consider, decide, and prepare written findings of fact if required for any site plan application rests with the City of Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission.
I
do you
don't disagree with
acknowledge
that because that deals with site plan review. That doesn't deal with code compliance. The code compliance is vested in the city's building official.
Let me stop right there. Let's save that discussion for another day because I don't think you'll find that concept supported by the Planning
Well,
Commission.
I think I will, because in the clear space argument that you all made to the mayor and commissioners, you actually said that the building official makes zoning determinations and that there's no mandate for the Planning Commission to make its own. So this Planning Commission actually has made that determination and argued that to the mayor and commissioners.
Sir, that's your opinion. We'll take it under advisement, and we appreciate your advocacy.
Well, it's not my opinion. It's actually in Mr. Mendelis' June 23, 2021 submission to the mayor and commissioners in writing on the appeal in the clear space matter. It's not my opinion. It's the Planning Commission's attorney in 2021 who made that statement.
What, do you have the exact statement that was made by Mr. Mendelis?
I do. Bear with me. And it was in writing. So I'm going to read a few parts of it. He talked about, and remember in this one, the Planning Commission said, based on the building official's determination, that the project was code compliant. We had third parties come in and say, we didn't think it was code compliant. The Planning Commission can ignore the building official's determination. That's what the clear space appeal was to the mayor and commissioners. He says, I'm reading this, it's page 5 of that submission that Mr. Mendelis submitted. As an initial matter, an initial determination as to whether an application is code compliant is made by the Rehoboth Beach Building and Licensing Department. And he cites 23632A, site plans shall be submitted to the Building and Licensing Department. The department shall review the site plan for compliance with zoning requirements. Under the city code, site plan applications undergo an initial review by the building inspector and all affected city departments and agencies. A site plan application is not forwarded to the RBPC until all departments and agencies determine that the site plan complies with their respective regulations and requirements. When all departments and agencies have confirmed the plan's compliance with their applicable regulations and codes, as occurred with the applications here, the site plan is forwarded from the building inspector to the RBPC. While the appellants, which was the third party, insist that section 23630 enables the RBPC to make an individual finding that an application is code compliant, such a mandate does not appear in that section. So that's Mr. Mendelis' statements that the building official makes the final determination, and you all are done by that.
I believe I heard you say the word initial determination. Did you say the word
Repeatedly.
initial determination?
Yes.
I did, but here's the problem with that. If the Planning Commission, if the building and licensing official makes a decision under your code, under the Board of Adjustments rules, there's 30 days to appeal that. That's also covered in Title 22 of the Delaware Code. It's actually covered in Friends of Plowden versus Newcastle County Board of Adjustment. If anybody disagrees with that, whether it's a person, a department, an agency, anybody, they have 30 days to appeal that determination of the building official to the Board of Adjustment. That's where final determinations of the building official are heard on appeal. And if you don't like that, you can go to Superior Court. That's the way it is. The problem is if the Planning Commission at any point could just ignore the building official's decision, there would never be any finality to anything in the city of Rehoboth Beach with regard to a building official determination. Because he could make a decision about a setback, or anything, and then if for whatever reason we got to come to the Planning Commission, 6 months later, you could say, well, we're not bound by that. Well, you are, because nobody appealed the original determination of the building official. That's what Title 22 says. That's what the City of Rehoboth Beach Code says. That's what the rules of the Board of Adjustment say. That's what Friends of Plowden versus Newcastle County Board of Adjustment say. And that's what Mr. Mandela said to the mayor and commissioners on the clear space appeal.
And you've read the Packham decision, I assume?
I have, yeah.
And that has some language that I don't think would make you very happy.
Actually, I think it does, because it talks about how you determine lot coverage and other things. I think it's very on point with regard to that.
Well, as I said earlier, and I'll repeat again, we're not here to debate that today. We've gone too far into it. That's a legal determination that can be worked out at a different time or in a different place. So I think we're through with that aspect of it today, and appreciate your advocacy.
Okay, well, I would, clearly where I'm coming from on this issue.
Oh, I think I've heard it a few times, sir.
Yeah, well.
I probably got it memorized.
Yeah, and I think you should, because, if we end up on appeal, that's part of the record that we're going to be dealing with.
That's why we have judges.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Well, at the end of the day, what we'd like is a decision that approves this. We think it's good for the city. We think it's good in terms of the comp plan, and we think it's code compliant along with all the city officials. If nothing else, we hope that you'll approve it, but if you don't, I don't want to get hung up in a hamster wheel of discussions over legal issues. Let's get this sorted out. So.
Mr. Bryan, I'd like to raise just one last factual issue, and that is this issue of code compliance and the opinion of the building inspector binding or not binding the Planning Commission. You raised it in the context of clear space, and Mr. Mandalis's comments brief were made as the attorney for the building inspector. But I think you would agree that the appellants argued to the contrary, and the Board of Commissioners reversed the building inspector and Mr. Mandalis and upheld the appellant's position.
I'm just talking about what Mr. Mandela submitted on behalf of you all, the Planning Commission, to the mayor and commissioners.
Thank you.
We've been over this ground enough today.
Oh, well, I'm just answering a question. So she asked the question, I'm answering it. So
Well, is your presentation complete?
my presentation is complete. It looks like we have some members of the public, so let's hear from those folks. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
The public first, if you want. It's up to you. I have just some questions, but you can go to the public if you want.
For Vince or for whom?
Anybody on the applicant, for the applicant.
Go ahead.
I just have a few questions. Again, the purpose of my question is just for establishing a record. There appear to be some discrepancy. I'm not sure how significant it is at the end of the day, but just factually, is this it's a third floor, a half story, or a full story? I saw some references that the second floor of the apartment is a half story, and I think that term is defined in the code, and other references refer to, in other words, is it a 3-story structure or a 2.5-story structure?
I'd ask Mr. Sholkoff to answer that one.
I believe under the interpretation we got in 2018 and then subsequently got in 2022 when we came for this project, that it's a half-story if it's 50% of the area of the floor below it. And so if you look at the calculations, they're very specifically kept to that. So we've kept the total of the second and third story to less than the 0.6 FAR, which is the limit for residential. So we're allowed up to 3,000 square feet total. So it's, it's the total residential is less than 3,000 square feet, and the total of the third floor is less than 50% of the second floor.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Robertson, you had referenced the 48 Wilmington property. Other than the fact that it exists and was approved, do you have any specific documents that you are relying on that reflects a code compliance analysis as opposed to a conclusion of approval?
I do. Oops. And I'm going to answer it a different way than, and not trying to dodge it. But give me 1 second. I got to find where I am on this. Oops. Mine's still in there. Yeah, no, that's fine. I just had to find mine. I did not do a FOIA request on this one, other than to get the set of plans. And by default, let me just, if I can blow this up. Oops. You can see that each one of those pages is signed by approved by the city of Rehoboth Beach. And unless the commission or you're saying that the city's going to approve something that's not code compliant, you know, that's de
I'm
facto
afraid you misunderstood my
evidence of
question.
approval.
I know that you had mentioned the city approved it. My question was, are you relying on or are you aware of any analysis as to how the city got to a determination of code compliance? That's my question.
I'm going to ask Mr. Janis that question. Mr. Janis, would
But-
there have been a
what-
building permit issued for this project if there had not been an analysis done
with all-
to show that it's compliant with the building code?
With all due respect, Mr. Robertson, if you'd please answer my question first. Are you aware of any?
I'm aware that the city approved this plan, and I'm fully aware that the city does not approve anything that's not code compliant. I mean, we all live in Rehoboth Beach. We know what the scrutiny is of all these projects. If there's a suggestion that somehow somebody got one over on the city, that's far-fetched in Rehoboth.
My question is specifically, are you aware of any written analysis as to how the city got to a conclusion of code compliance?
Yes, the plans that are signed, the data block on these plans that show that it's compliance with the code.
Thank you.
Mr. Janis, can I ask that question? Would there have been a building permit
Now,
issue?
Mr. Robertson, we're really not here to, he wasn't the building inspector for 48 Wilmington. And I'm not sure I don't think you were the building inspector on ClearSpace. So
No, I was not.
I think Mr. Janis could, if he so chooses, could answer what current city policy is from a building inspector's standpoint that is not binding on the planning commission. Now, do you wish to pursue that line of, that inquiry?
I would like to, for the record, Mr. Janis, would there have been a building permit issued and this house, the structure constructed, if it had not been compliant with the code and a full
He
analysis?
was not there at the time. He was not the building inspector. And building inspectors change, as do city solicitors, as from time to time opinions change by those individuals.
Yeah, I guess the question I would ask is, it was approved, Mr. Janis, by one person, correct? It would have been approved by a building inspector, correct?
It was approved by the building official at the time.
That's all.
Okay. Did you work for the city at that time, Mr. Janis?
Yeah.
Was that 18? Yes, I was employed at that time.
You worked with, I guess it was Mr. Molina at that time who would have reviewed this?
It was Mr. Molina.
Okay. And would he have performed a thorough review of the zoning requirements before issuing a building permit?
I think we're again, we're far enough down now. The inquisition is over. And do you have any other free part of your presentation, sir?
Well, since we're on this, and I cited
No,
this in
we're through with this aspect
Well,
of it, sir.
I can still make a presentation. You asked the relevance in one of the comments about the significance of 48 Wilmington Avenue. Under the Jack Lingo decision, I think if you're going to say that that was approved and ours are not, or shouldn't be, that means there's ambiguity in the code. And there is a wealth of case law that talks about any ambiguities in the code go to the benefit of the property owner. So, I mean, if we're in court and we're saying, Your Honor, they approved this building, which is essentially identical to ours with the same code determination as ours, and they made a different determination on ours, that's going to be two different interpretations, which means an ambiguity, which means the tie goes to the runner in baseball terms and the property owner. That's well settled Delaware case. So,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, any member of the public here to address this? Yes, sir, please come forward and state your name, and if you would, limit your time to 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Bob Cartwright, and some of you know me and some of you don't. I've been around town a while. Bob's Bike Rentals on First Street, the coffee mill in the Muse. And actually, what's interesting is to see our Muse alleyway was one of the pictures that I was sitting there going, geez, boy, the place is looking a lot better than it did back when they took those pictures. The long and the short of it is I'm here in favor of this. And the reason being is we've always talked in town about having living space above stores. And the other thing is the applicant. Mr. McCarthy, as you know, we're all friends and neighbors here. Where does he live? It's on Baltimore Avenue. Where is his business located? Right here in the middle of downtown Rehoboth Beach. If you take a look on the one side of town, you see nothing but the homes that this man has built for our other residents. Everything he's done is quality. One of his projects, which wasn't brought up today, I happened to pass on my way into town back from the store today, was the Houston White building. We're all familiar with Houston White, the steakhouse. What is it? You have a retail restaurant on the bottom, and you have living space up above. And I would just like to say, as a longtime member of the community and a businessman, as you're very well aware of 3 businesses right now, the coffee mill, the milk creamery, and the brass store. We own all 3. That I'm in favor of this project because I think it's good for the city. I looked at those pictures and I'm like, you know what? What a great thing to have when you first come into town. Because I didn't look at that as actually storefronts. I'm like, they're nice houses. And then I'm looking again, I'm like, they're actually commercial, but on the other hand, they're nice looking places. And I just think this isn't some horseshoe salesman that just blew into town. This guy has a vested interest in this community. His business is here. His home is here. Everything they do is top quality, and I hope the commissioners would also take a look at this as well as the applicant and say, this isn't some horseshoe salesman here to sell us some horse stuff. He's got to look at that. He's got to deal with you guys again because there'll be other projects that come up in town. He's going to be back in front of you, I'm sure, somewhere down the road. Someone else in town would like to do something again, and they're going to hire Mr. McCarthy and his people also. I just want to let you know that I myself, as a well-known, well, not kind of well-known, local guy, I just wanted to stop in here and let you know that I'm in favor of this as well as my business partner as well, Mel. And I hope you guys can somehow come to a decision and give him this because when you look at those pictures, that's what we want to see. I don't like driving into town seeing that vacant lot sitting there or something dilapidated and whatever. This is something that really meets our town and will really be an asset to the city of Rehoboth Beach and all of us as friends and neighbors because that's what he is, a friend and a neighbor. All right?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name's Sharon Covington. I live at 105 St. Lawrence. I hadn't intended on talking today, but after listening to this, I feel a bit compelled. I appreciate all the time that you put into this. I also appreciate the time that's been put in by these people. And I'm here because I'm really perplexed because we have a beautiful structure that's entirely code compliant, that will bring revenue into the city. And I feel that there is, this is my perception, an obstructionistic approach to any sort of changes that are taking place here. Our budget this year is $4 million over. We've just hired a city commissioner at $250,000, about $100,000 more than the last. Our taxes have gone up on every single level. And we have an opportunity to build something here that's going to bring revenue in, is beautiful, is code compliant, and from my perspective will only bring good. So I'm really, really quite distressed in hearing the kinds of questions that are coming up, which I experience is trying to keep a good thing from happening. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Hi, Rick Perry from 46 Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm not here to discuss, your interpretation of whether or not you can ignore the building inspector's determination. I think you understand my position on that, and is the same as Mr. Robertson's. I do want to throw my vote in behind Mr. Cartwright and Sharon. for, their explanation as to why they are supporting this project, and I think they are right on point. I might add that the project doesn't have to comply with every single aspirational aspect of the CDP. I was a former chair of this commission and started the CDP, which you completed. So I'm not speaking from some, cabbage patch somewhere. I know what I'm talking about. And I would hope that you would approve this project and move it forward. And that is the right thing to do. It is everything that the opponents of Clear Space said they wanted to see in that location. And that's what Mr. McCarthy has brought to you. So I don't understand why there are so many, what I consider to be irrelevant technicalities being raised by the Planning Commission. Let me remind you that the Planning Commission's authority is to review the site plan, not whether there are closets inside, not how large the living room is, site plan. So please stick to your business.
Thank you, sir. Anyone? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I wasn't going to say this. So to understand my perspective a little bit, I get people coming to me all different ways. They want this there, they want that there. There's a lot of different opinions on this whole thing. I get a lot of people, had told me that I was going to have a really difficult time no matter what I tried to put there. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I think if, we take something that the majority of the community likes and, we can kind of get a consensus and, something has to go there. It can't just stay like 3 vacant lots. Many people have come to me and basically said, if you don't get anywhere, you should just abort this whole thing and put 3 residential houses there and rent them. I think that would be a horrible mistake. To come in around the circle of Rehoboth and you see 3 residential houses in a C1 district next to this huge ARC condominium building, I think it would look ridiculous. So I really hope you guys will work with me and try to get this through, because I don't want to be left where I feel like the only thing that I can do is do 3 residential houses, which again would look ridiculous. And I also want you to remember, when we started this whole thing, is I did all the right things. I didn't try to get 1 through. I brought all 3 to you. I could easily have done 1 project, and then I knew everyone was going to say, well, what's going to go on the next lot? Then I said, what, I'll just bring everything to you guys and we'll show you. I had multiple meetings with Matt because I was told, the best way to go about it was to meet with him several times. He can kind of take us through what we can do there. I wanted to do mixed use. I thought that would be the best use of the property. And we keep going back to the one on Wilmington. Not that it has to be the exact same, but that seemed to be like a project everyone liked. So, we had these conversations with Matt. We did all our due diligence. We did all the right things along the way. And then now you guys are saying, well, we don't necessarily agree whether it's code compliant or not. Well, how is that fair to me when, it's been, almost 2 years. I invested a ton of money based on your representation, meaning the city, a building inspector that I work with to try to develop something that's code compliant. And now 2 years later, I get in front of you and you basically saying, well, just because he says it or just because Wallace Montgomery says it, it's not code compliant. So what should I do? Just take it, throw it away and start all over again? I mean, this thing can go on for 10 years. I mean, you guys have to understand that too. I just don't think it's fair. Why didn't Wallace Montgomery tell me it was code compliant, wasn't code compliant? Why didn't Matt Jan? This is like, honestly, I feel like I'm being set up and tricked. That's how I feel. That's the perception that I feel like, because I did all the right things. I met with your officials. I did everything I was supposed to do. I didn't go and build 3 houses. That would have been the easy way out. I did the right thing. And now basically what you're telling me is it's garbage, it's junk.
I don't think anybody said that.
Well, I'm just telling you, that's the perception I'm getting.
Well,
So I just want you to, I'm sitting down, but I'm just saying that's how I feel right now. So again, I just want to say that for the record.
Well, I'd like to say for the record that no one on the Planning Commission has said it is not code compliant. No one has said it's an ugly project. No one has said they don't like the design. It's an issue about a legal issue that Mr. Robertson is advocating that I think there's some serious disagreement on. Now, how we get to where we're going and we want to move this process forward, let's just let the process work its way through.
Yeah,
Just one point, I'm not advocating anything. I'm just stating that it's code compliant based on the city building official and the city's consultant. I mean,
But that's your position, Mr. Robertson.
that's the city's position.
Mr. Robertson, it comes down to something more than that, and let's not play word games here, please. You know very well what the issue is. It needs to be resolved. It will be resolved. But let's let this process run its course here, because I think this is being used as an issue to create some type of controversy here.
How is that so when we're saying it's code compliant? Well, we're not creating a controversy. We've got the city saying it's code compliant.
Any determinations, both factually and legally, will be made by the Planning Commission at the conclusion of a public hearing.
No, I understand that.
Okay, so
we're not there yet.
The purpose of a preliminary review, as the chairman, is to identify factual and legal issues that need to be vetted before scheduling a public hearing. That's what we're doing, okay?
And that actually goes
Oh,
to.
wait, with the scheduling the public, we're past the concept.
No, this is preliminary review.
Preliminary review. This is
For the
preliminary.
okay, for the
Yeah,
font.
and then after this, if there moves to a public hearing, then then people will be put under oath and all that sort of thing. There'll be findings of fact and conclusions of law.
I don't know that
And
that's
that's my question, is since the purpose of this was to determine if there's any, if there is any outstanding information or let's see, if any additional information is needed or if there are any factual issues, are there any? Or are we ready to move this to public hearing, or how do we determine that?
Well, I've been trying to get to that point, to discuss that.
Make sure there's no other public comment.
And so I would like to, Mr. Perry, I mean, do you really need to speak? Do you have something really important to tell us? Okay, well, can you be brief? Because you've had one opportunity.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Let me simply point out that you should not be bringing any application to a public hearing if you haven't already determined that it is code compliant. This is the time to make that decision.
Well,
That's the way the
Let's
Planning
move
Commission
on.
operates.
Thank you, sir. That's your opinion.
Gathering information.
May I speak? Mr. McCarthy, I think what you've put before us is a really nice project. But it's our job, when you come to site plan review, to point out discrepancies between our code and regulations and your proposed project. When I simply asked Mr. Robertson about his interpretation of building height, I got a legal definition. There's an issue. You have a residential component and you have a commercial component. Those two components have different building height requirements. So I don't know how it devolved into who said what, but the purpose of the site plan review, preliminary review, is to help us see where things are simpatico and where things are not. And that's where we are.
Anyone else?
I want to speak when I vote.
Voting on moving to public hearing.
All right, anyone else? All right, I closed the public hearing, public side of this, closed, please. The public comment side. Is there a motion to move this to public hearing?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Okay,
So do we want a roll call?
let's
vote
just
on
go ahead
this
and do
one?
a roll call vote. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll call your name and vote on moving it to public hearing. Commissioner Davis.
I'm going to vote for moving this to public hearing with the caveat that my understanding is that we can still, either during or subsequent to public hearing, raise additional either factual or legal issues. And therefore, as far as I know, and far as I've seen, I agree with Commissioner Stewart that this project is appealing, and I think it should go to public hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Ellison.
I support moving this to a public hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Hunter.
I also vote to move this to public hearing, and what I want to say is directed toward the public perception of discussions, heated discussions that arose that are not particularly an impediment to the people who've been waiting for so long. I do appreciate your appreciation of the fact that we scheduled a special meeting in order to consider your application. And I hope that you will appreciate that there are very important legal questions, questions of precedent, that are not about the intrinsic appeal of this particular project, or even about whether this particular project is code compliant. And those are the issues about which I, at least, am extremely concerned. And I have been quiet during those conversations, which is not an indication that I am in agreement with some of the arguments and assertions that have been made to the commission with regard to legal questions. That has taken up, a great deal of this meeting time. And for the people who are waiting for a decision about what is actually before us today, I would ask that you consider how and why that particular delay has occurred. I'm sorry that people in the community have indicated that it's, there's, no point in moving forward, or that we are obstructionist. In my view, we are not at all obstructionist. We are trying to do our job, and we are trying to comply with our understanding of the law, which, as Chair Bryan has said many times, will be resolved, but not today. So I vote to move forward.
Commissioner Stewart.
I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Commissioner Stockdale's not here. Commissioner Strange.
I'm in favor of it.
And I guess the last two are us, so I'll just say I'm certainly in favor of moving this to public hearing, and I also appreciate that you all appreciate that we scheduled the special meeting, and I'd also like to acknowledge that I believe we have moved this forward pretty expeditiously. We had the concept hearing in November where you addressed the comments we made there, and now we've come to preliminary hearing, and we were able to do both of those in one meeting each. So we move forward. Thank you. And Chair Bryan?
Yes, I support moving it forward to public hearing. I certainly adopt the comments from Commissioner Hunter. This is a legal issue that will need to be resolved, and just saying something over and over doesn't mean it's the law. That's why we have guys in black robes that make decisions, if that's where we're headed.
So I think it's unanimous to move it to public hearing.
Yes, so we will schedule a public hearing, Mr. Robertson.
Okay. Okay, so do we have anything else today?
I don't think we do.
Do we have the does the building inspector have any
Yes.
verbal report?
Mr. Janus, at risk
Yes, sir.
At risk of putting you at risk, do you have a building inspector's report?
I believe it's attached, and I'm sure I can surely entertain any questions that you may have.
Okay, anyone else?
I have one question.
Yes.
Yeah, Matt, as typical, we see it with the increase in spring, that the number of outside working normal business hours has gone up
yes.
dramatically. And as I've experienced those as a citizen occurring relatively near me, how should I say this? What are the fines for working more than once beyond normal business hours?
They're not very punishing, if you will. I can tell you this, we do have 2 code enforcers now on staff. We have one that's arriving early in the morning to catch the early starters, and we have one that's on duty to catch the late workers. In my opinion, they have been doing a phenomenal job.
Why there's an increase.
Correct, and that's why, exactly. And so I think the record, reflects the job that they're doing. And as they saturate more patrols over and over. The contractors are learning some valuable lessons and hopes that the occurrences of working before and after hours will significantly decrease in the near
But
future.
essentially, they can't lose their business license if they keep violating that particular law.
It is an option for us. It's kind of a last resort for us. Obviously, you know, we're all in the business of making money. We have to eat some way. So if, for repeat offenders, that certainly is an option for us. And we're kind of reluctant again to use that, but it is in extreme cases
The reason
an
I ask
option
that
for
is
us.
because there's been a few contractors who, over the years, have consistently followed the rules.
Yes.
I mean, they absolutely follow the rules, and they do a great job. And there's others that appear to consistently absolutely not give a darn about it. And
If I-
they're the ones that concern me the most.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know if this is if it makes you feel better when I say this, but those are the ones that are usually a one-offer. They're into the city for their one-time job only, and then they're out of the city. We usually our repeat offenders are usually not the ones that are primarily doing the majority of the work in the town limits and city limits. Excuse me.
All right, well, as a citizen, I'll probably write a letter to the mayor indicating they ought to probably increase the fines dramatically, so they get a warning, and after that, it has to be significant enough to impact that. Because I remember years ago with EPA, businesses would say, screw it, I'll pay the fine every week because it's cheaper than actually installing $2 million worth of equipment. So, anyway, thank you.
A quick question. Is there a middle ground between imposing a fine that is really just a cost of doing business for these folks and suspending their license altogether? Are temporary suspensions of licenses possible?
There is.
You don't have to, that was
Yes, there is.
a suggestion.
All right, anything else? Any new applications?
We do have, I'm just trying to think of memory right now.
Got some lot
We've got some lot consolidations coming in. We've got some lots partitionings. There are some rumor mill stuff out there. There's some lingering applications that went and received some variances that should be coming before you soon. I've been trying to keep a hold of those different applicants to try to make sure that they know their timelines for that expiration of their variance requests. And I believe we also have, yes, the infamous 801 Bayard mini subdivision. So
Minor subdivision. Okay.
minor subdivision, excuse me, yes. So that should be coming before you very soon.
Okay. Anything else, members of the commission? Thank you.
All right.
We're adjourned.
Happy Friday Eve, guys.
Actually, good time, too.